The Mandalorian and Grogu continues the adventures of the title characters following the events of Season 3 of The Mandalorian as they work with the New Republic to hunt down the remaining Imperial warlords scattered throughout the galaxy. To find their new target, Imperial Commander Coin, they must work with the Hutts and rescue Jabba the Hutt's son, Rada the Hutt. The Mandalorian and Grogu is a decently entertaining time. The opening 15 or so minutes especially capture everything I think most people want out of another story involving these characters, with an excellent action sequence that sees Mando just plowing his way through an Imperial base, and Grogu getting up to his own shenanigans as this goes on. It's a great way to reintroduce us to this world and these characters, and coupled with a bit of informational text at the start of the film, as Star Wars usually has, although not in the form of an opening crawl, I think it's enough to ensure new viewers who have never seen the show can at least somewhat understand what's going on. There's also some pretty fantastic puppetry going on throughout this movie. Of course, with Grogu and also some other creatures that I don't know the name of. I'll flash an image of them up on screen. That makes for some really fun and cute moments. If you've seen the show, you would of course expect Grogu to continue to be adorable, which, I mean, obviously is the case. In the second half of this movie, we even get a segment where Grogu basically becomes the main character for a little bit. And in general, these kinds of practical effects I'm always going to enjoy more than CGI. It really injects some life into these characters that I just don't think would be there otherwise. Of course, the movie does use a lot of CGI, so these practical effects are limited, but I still very much appreciate what is there. Ludwig Göransson's score is great too, being one of the best qualities of the entire movie. Of course, there's a lot of motifs from the show that are repeated here, but it does do a good job at reimagining them in interesting ways that makes the score feel fresh and not just like a copy and paste job. For example, during one segment of the film, Göransson takes the score in a more electronic direction, something not necessarily typical of Star Wars, but it perfectly sets the vibe, and as I said before, makes the score feel more fresh than it would have otherwise. Unfortunately, this is probably where most of the positives stop for me. Again, while this movie is entertaining, it feels almost superficial as there's really nothing of substance here. There's no real furthering of Mando and Grogu's story, no important character development. Everything just feels inconsequential, like you could watch whatever project these two appear in next without having seen this movie and it would be like you missed nothing. The closest this movie ever comes to having something worthwhile is in exploring the fact that because of how long Grogu is going to live for, that one day Din is not going to be there for him anymore. But even with this, it doesn't get as into it as much as I would have liked. There's no real meaningful exploration into this topic. I think you could at least say that the relationship between these two characters is deepened a little bit because of the way this topic is explored, and I think looking at that segment of the movie as an isolated thing, there's a decent amount to like. But I think when you put it in the context of the rest of the movie, I'm just not sure it works as well as you would hope. It does also at least work to develop Grogu's independence a little bit more, which will always be a good thing, because as much as I love to watch him because of how adorable he is, I don't think the franchise can just ride off of that forever. But even with this, I still don't think there's much of significance. These moments with Grogu are not substantial enough that they will matter when he shows up again. And again, don't get me wrong, the movie is entertaining at times, but I just so badly wish that I could walk away from this with more positive things to say than just that. The movie feels like a cash grab in that way. Like Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau didn't really know what direction to take the story in, and that they didn't put in the effort to find that direction. And I guess superficial entertainment value is enough for the movie to still make money. And for a corporation like Disney, that is ultimately what matters to them at the end of the day. But again, it's just disappointing that there's really just not that much creativity here. I do think that the first half of the movie is quite a bit better than the second half, as it does feel like there is that sense of direction with where the film is going, and this part of the film probably also features the best action sequences, and what was probably also my favorite planet visited during the movie. And by comparison, the second half feels largely tacked on and uninteresting, and also, unfortunately, makes the first half, even if maybe a little bit more entertaining, feel just as meaningless. It really feels like these two halves were just two longer episodes of the show stitched together. There's a very clear endpoint for the first half, and a very clear start point for the second half. Even though it's still all one story involving the same characters, It's not like the movie is two completely standalone parts. It still feels really disjointed. This is an issue I've had with the show too, where there isn't much cohesion between story beats, and it ends up feeling like the equivalent of someone just writing, this happened, and then this happened. We go from point A to point B for the next action set piece, seemingly without much care for how smooth this transition feels. The structure feels almost video game-like, where, you go and talk to one character and you get a quest. And then on that quest, you meet someone that has an item or information for you relevant to this current quest, but you have to do a different quest for them to get it. This kind of thing is just not a good feeling to have walking away from any movie. The plot flowing together cohesively makes such a difference for making everything in a movie feel connected and interesting. But when things don't, and they are obviously supposed to, it feels like incredibly lazy storytelling. I really do wish that I enjoyed this movie more. As like with many people, Star Wars has been a part of my life since I was really young, and it was my favorite franchise for a long time. But a lot of what's come out recently has felt creatively bankrupt, like this movie does, with admittedly some obvious exceptions like Andor, which is absolutely fantastic, by the way, and you should definitely watch it if you haven't. I just think that this is a franchise that has so much potential for great storytelling, and like I said, we've seen a little bit of that. And even The Mandalorian is a show that I've enjoyed a lot in the past. But I do get the feeling that Disney would rather just continue to ride off of, how cute Grogu is and how cool Mando is, rather than take this story in an actually interesting and worthwhile direction. For me, The Mandalorian and Grogu is a 2.5 out of 5. If you'd like more film reviews like this one, I would love for you to subscribe and leave a like on the video, but any amount of support is appreciated. Thanks so much for watching The Final Take, and have a good day.